Hi, I'm Paul Spangenberg. Me and my family run Nightcire Handmade. It's a small family-run business where we do woodworking and some art and many things like this, but in this particular instance, I'm here to pass my knowledge of woodworking on to you. I use relatively simple techniques that anybody can master. We don't get anything real fancy, but we come out with some very nice products, and we're here to show you how to do it. What we're making today is a rack for drying and holding your reusable straws. If you have reusable straws, or you're going to get them, you notice if you lay them flat, they don't dry nicely. So we're making a rack for them. It's really simple. We're going to use maple. And right here we're doing a 15-degree cut. And, you know, it's hard to gauge exactly where that 15 degree is, so sometimes you got to edge that wood up where you're right. We're going to start then. We're going to make this piece 1 inch long. And that's from the longest part of the cut. You know, this piece can vary if you want to, but there's no need for it to be more than this. We're doing this out of a larger piece to start with, because that way we save our fingers from getting too close to the blade. We're going to then make 2 5-inch pieces after this, and that's all the pieces of wood you will need for this project. We're using maple because maple is a close-grained, food-safe wood. So we're going to cut 2 5-inch pieces, and then we're going to move on to our next saw. Alright, we're going to take one of the 5-inch pieces. We're going to then set our saw at 1/4 inch. We're going to use a table saw and set it at 1/4 inch. Now you see my little sacrificial board there is because I don't have a zero clearance for my blade. And so I just put a 1/2 inch piece, set it at 3/4, and put a 1/2 inch piece of stock there so that I then get a 1/4 inch piece. So here's the beauty of this project. You're going to cut 2 1/4 inch pieces off of here. They're 1/4 inch wide. You're going to be left with right about 3/4 of an inch on that board. So that's going to be your top. So you're making your 2 posts for the back and your top right here all out of one piece of wood. Now you can always make it out of separate woods, things like this if you like to. But I made this and I made it this way so it's really easy and a very efficient use of the wood. Wood's not cheap. Let's not use any more than we have to. Alright, so now we've got the saw set to make our 1/8 inch groove. It's 1/8 inch from the end and it's 1/8 deep. So if you set the saw, it's an 1.5 inch piece. This is the other 1.5 inch piece, by the way. And if you set the saw at 1 1/4 inches with the blade depth, it will get you exactly where you need to be. Here, we're going to set the saw again at that 15-degree angle. But if you notice, I used the piece that I cut on the miter saw to get the right angle. That's because, you know, you set these things up and there's presets on the saw sometimes and things, but you want to make sure those angles match up. Now, I set my saw, if you set it straight on, at 1 3/16, and then you set the angle, it comes out perfect. You may have to play with this with a piece of scrap, or set it more than you need to make it, or longer, wider than you need it, and always back it in to get the exact angle the way you need it. Alright, we are now going to sand, and I'm using my belt sander. You can hand sand these if you like, but you know, an investment in a belt sander is a beautiful thing. So what we're sanding here is the bottom, and we're going to sand the uprights. We're not messing with the top just yet, because we're going to get those going. And all we're doing is making sure all the sides stay nice and level. This is why I like the belt sander. You can do this with a sanding block. You can do this with a hand sander. And this right here, if you see this little thing, it's a little chunk of rubber you buy. And you can get them at most hardware stores. You can find them online. You can find them a lot of spots. It's a cleaning stick. And it helps get more life out of your belt. Like this belt should have been retired a long time ago. But I hit it with the cleaning stick and it gets all the little things of sawdust and things out of there. It's a little trick for you. And they're not expensive. I think they're, I don't know, last time I bought one, I think it was like $5 or $6. Depends on when you're watching this video. And they really just run them right across while it's running, and it clears the belt beautifully. And you'll extend the life of your belt by 3-4 times its normal life. Small life hack. Anyway, so all we're doing is we're going to make sure that all of these surfaces are sanded. And when you get to that 15-degree spot, the spot that you cut at 15 degrees, you don't want to lose that 15 degree. So be careful there that you're not, that you're sanding it kind of, straight. We're going to sand the sides the same way. We're going to sand the ends. We're not worrying about getting anything like rounded off or pretty or anything like that. We're going to do that last. But just a bunch of surface sanding, because those are the surfaces you're not going to be able to get into when we get further on. Alright, so this groove that you have cut here, this 1/8 inch groove, take a piece of sandpaper, fold it up a little bit, and run it right through that groove. You want to make that nice and smooth. And it's not like anybody can stick a finger and they're going to get a splinter, but you want it to look nice. You want it to be nice. And when you're sanding it like this, you're going to naturally kind of brown those corners off a little bit, and that's really what you want. There's our uprights. We're going to get those sanded. All of those surfaces get sanded nicely, and that's all we're going to do. We're also going to get that back piece, that other 15 degree small piece that you got. We're going to get that surface sanded as well and make it all nice and pretty. Now you're not going to sand the 15 degree area on this piece. There's no need. It's going to be glued straight on and none of it will be showing. So you might as well just not mess with the angle there. There's no reason to mess it up. Unless, of course, for some reason your saw was a little rough with it and you need to kind of clean it up a little bit. We don't always use, let's be honest with ourselves, our blades are not always as sharp as they should be. Alright, all we're doing here is our uprights need to match that 15 degrees. So we're going to set our saw, our miter saw here at 15 degrees. And you could do this on your table saw if you want to. It's just the miter saw is so much easier, for me at least. All we're doing is we're just shaving just that last, you can't see it because of the saw and I can't figure out how to get the camera in there, so sorry about that. But if you look here, you can see it's just a small angle and we're just shaving that last little bit off. We're not losing any length at all, and if you do lose a little bit of length to it, just make sure they're both the same size, they're both the same length. It's not that big a deal. I've got it at 5 inches tall, but if it's 4 7/8, no one's going to notice or care. It's still going to work. It's still going to be a really beautiful piece. Don't waste wood. Alright, so now for the first glue up. You're going to take the bottom piece, and you want to make sure that the groove and the angle is on, is facing out from you. It's really hard to say, but you see how this is working? How that's facing out from you? And then the groove is on the other side of this where those fit. When you watch the whole video before you start, and then you'll see the finished product, and you get a much better idea to this. Alright, so here's the Handyman secret clamp right here, painter's tape. This stuff is nice for all the things that are really hard to clamp, because this is not an easy space to clamp in. You can clamp it if you want to and you really want to go for it. It's not that necessary. It's going to be holding straws, and the glue is 200-pound test. It's gonna be fine. I am using a waterproof glue. Waterproof glue is so much nicer you know, you never know when it's going to have contact with water, and this definitely will, because sooner or later you're going to want to wipe it down and wash it. Okay, so it's a 1/2 inch from the side. Now I'm cheating here. You can get a ruler and measure it, but that's a 1/2 inch piece of wood. So there's really no need. As long as it's straight and solid, it's fine. I'm going to use the same piece on the other side. If you want to adjust this and make it a 1/4 inch, or if you want to make it an inch because you think it looks a little better, do it. It's not going to hurt the contact of this piece. If you notice, I'm putting a little bit of glue on, and I'm spreading it out with my fingers so I have the entire contact. Again, you can use a brush, you can use a spare piece, but, you know, I don't mind getting a little glue on my finger. If you notice, my other life hack over here is an old sock. It is a great way to repurpose a sock that you've worn a hole in and use it to wipe your glue on before you have to throw it away, because ultimately we're going to wind up throwing these things away. So you might as well get another life out of it before you do, and save yourself, you know, get a little environmentally friendly, save yourself some money. So we're using a square to make sure that the uprights are, well, upright, and that they're nice and square, because if you don't, when you put that top on, it's then just not going to work. It's going to look kind of off center and that kind of thing. And again, if you're making it for your own use and you don't mind a little off center, it's not the end of the world, but I kind of like things all nice and pretty. So we're going to let that sit there, and we're going to let it dry while we work on the top. Alright, so this is the top, and I really hope you can see this past my fingers. It's a small piece of wood, and I don't have the smallest fingers around. So it's a 3/4 inch piece of wood, and in this case, it's about a 1/16 more than 3/4 of an inch. So what I'm doing is I'm just finding the center on both sides. It's easiest this way. Just find both centers. You can use a centering jig if you like, but it's just not something that I think is really necessary. Although, if you have one, use it. It's fast, it's easy, it works. But you're drawing a line down the center. And this is we're going to drill some holes so we have the room for all the straws and for the little bendy parts that come with the straws. I don't know what you call those, so if you have a name for them, cool. So we're going to do 1/2 inch apart. From one end, we're going to start. We're going to make a line 1/2 inch apart so we know where to put our holes. And we're going to do 6 of them. So you're going to go down to the 3-inch mark. Then we're going to go from the other end and start at a 1/2 inch and make one mark, then 3/4 of an inch and make another mark. And when you do that, mark that one at 7/16. Those 2 holes that you do on that end are going to be 7/16. So we're going to the drill press, and again, you can do this by hand. Just try to make sure it's as straight as possible. The drill press is just a much nicer tool to make sure nice straight holes. So all we're doing, and you can't see past my fingers, I am sorry about that, but I'm hitting right on those marks, those 1/2 inch marks, and we're going to drill the 3/8 inch holes. Now, if you have your straws and you're using, like, say, the bamboo ones that are a little bit bigger, and you need to make a bigger slot there, you can. You've got a good 1/8 inch to work with there, so you could come in and make probably a 1/2 inch hole there. It'll affect the look of it a little bit, but it'll still work really nice. And it'll still look good, because that's what we want, is something that looks good and functions well. Unlike me, I function well, just don't look so good. So we're just making sure that those holes are right on that, and we want to make sure they stay in a nice line, because if they stay in a nice line, it's going to be much more aesthetically pleasing. And, you know, aesthetically pleasing is what you want when you're making, especially if you're making this as a gift for someone, or even for your own counter. I mean, I kind of like things to look nice. Alright, so we're going to switch to a 7/16 drill bit, and that's what I've determined for most of the straws is good for, you know, putting the little bendy type pieces and things. And again, I don't know what they're called. But we're going to go to 7/16, and again, you could make this quite a bit bigger if you like. And just a fast point here, I'm using brad point drill bits. If you have the bullet point, which is what most people have, they work fine. It's easier to put it right on that dot when you have a brad point. So I do suggest, if you're buying drill bits for this, or you need to buy some, get some brad points. If you don't and you want to use your bullet point drill bits, that's perfectly fine. They're going to work great. Alright, so now we're going to use the 45-degree part of our square. And when you look at the pattern, because we'll make sure we link the pattern to this, it's you go to one end and you go right to the middle, that middle center line that you go out, and put in a 45-degree angle. On the next one, go up to the first 3/8 hole, go to the middle of that, where the middle line hits that hole, and take your 45-degree to there. This is where we're going to cut on our bandsaw, and you can see it on here where those lines met. All right, so now we're going to cut them out on our bandsaw, and we're going to come down that center line, and just be really careful and meticulous here. Just go right down the line, and when you're cutting through a hole like that, just don't push hard. Take your time, and just go right through it. Again, you can do this with a handsaw. It's just I have power tools and I'm not about to do it with a handsaw if I don't have to. Alright, so once you get to that last hole, make sure you're through the hole completely. And then just come through and just follow that next 45-degree right on out. And boom, look at that. We're going to cut that other piece off. And it's starting to take shape. It looks a little weird right now, but it works. Okay, so now we're going to find the center of what's left, which should be a 3/8 inch piece left. 3/16 should be the center. And we're going to do the same thing from the side. You can't see it there because I'm sorry I couldn't get the camera in there to show you. I'll figure out a way to do that, I promise. But you can see the line there, and all it is a nice little spot there. It's all of these are just for aesthetics. If you don't want them there, you don't need them there. But I kind of like them because it makes it look kind of nice. You could also just sand that in on the sander and it wouldn't be a big deal. Alright, so now we're going to sand that top piece. We're going to start with surfaces, making sure it's all nice. And again, I like the belt sander, but you could sand this by hand. Sanding blocks are nice. And a sanding block, if you don't know, you can buy fancy ones at the store, or you can take a scrap block of wood, wrap a piece of sandpaper around it, and use it. It works really nice. There are nicer ways to do things, and there are, the way I do them. I don't spend a lot of money on fancy tools. I like fancy tools, but my shop is small. This is a working wood shop. This is a production wood shop and not a studio, so there's dust. You can see the old defunct pocket knife in the back there that it won't close anymore, so we just use it for things we need in the shop because you can't carry it in your pocket that way. Anyway, we're doing the surfaces and we're doing a slight round to them just to kind of give it a little more aesthetic. If you want to leave it very geometric, you can. There's nothing wrong with that. I just kind of like the rounding off of the things. Now, here's how we're going to sand these the drill holes here, the spots for the straws. We're going to use some really high-tech stuff here. We're going to use a 3/8 dowel rod, and we're going to wrap a piece of sandpaper around it, and we're going to sand those. They stay the exact same width. They don't. It's not going to mess with the aesthetics of it. It's the best way to do it. Just a little piece of 3/8 dowel and go. And again, if you don't have a 3/8 dowel hanging around, you could do this by hand. You could use anything that's the right diameter. Heck, you could probably use a pencil. I think pencil's about 5/16. So just wrap the sandpaper around a few more times. If you tear the sandpaper, well, just flip it over. But we're going to make them nice and smooth. And again, I'm using maple here, and the maple naturally sands very nice and very smooth. It's a beautiful wood to work with. I would also recommend like hickory, cherry, walnut. All those are nice food-safe woods. And you don't necessarily have to have a food-safe wood. It's not like you're eating off of it. It just makes me feel better, especially since we sell these, that it's made out of a food-safe wood. So we're just going to sit here and it doesn't take but a few minutes. And it sands nicely. We're using 220 grit sandpaper. Should have told you that before. The belt was 220. The sandpaper is 220. It doesn't really matter. Just use a nice fine grit. You don't have to go down to like some 4,000 grit or anything like that to make it smooth. It's going to be nice. Now, what I'm doing is I'm relieving the edges of the holes there. And all that's going to do is if you relieve the edges and you don't leave them all sharp, it has a less chance of you getting any splinters. So I'm just coming through here and I'm just making sure that everything is nice and pretty the way I want it. Machines are great, but sometimes you just can't, you just can't get what you can get with hand sanding. You can feel it a lot better. This little spot here, that little inside groove, take your little hand sander or sand it by hand. It's just easier to kind of get in there with that. The bottom line is when you're done, that it's all nice and smooth. And take your hand, run it across it. Now for this, what I'm doing is I'm running the sandpaper this way, and then I'm going to run it that way. And that's going to smooth out those rough edges from where that hole is. It's a real simple technique, and it takes almost no time at all to do. Alright, so you got your piece from earlier. And now all we're going to do is take that, and we're going to just glue this right on the top. Do the same thing as we did the last time. Put a little bit of glue in there. Spread it around. Use our sock when we need to get rid of glue. If you keep the top of the glue clean, it's so much easier. I like keeping things nice. Alright, so we're just going to set that piece on top. We're going to use our square on the bottom to make sure that that piece comes up exactly where it should be. And that's the way it's going to look really nice and aesthetically pleasing. It's going to work really nice. And it's a real easy way to do that. If you do not have a combination square in your shop, I highly suggest getting one. Now just clamp that. You can clamp that since they're nice and easy. No big deal. They're straight on clamping. These are just really, guys, those are just some cheap clamps I got. You do not need 10,000 pounds of force to make sure these things work. All right. Now we're going to get the back piece. That back piece, that's the one that stops it from tipping over. So here's our little trick. We're going to take 2 pieces of wood and we're going to clamp them there. Now what's going to happen is when we put that other piece in the back there, it's going to stop it. We're going to be able to clamp it in nicely, and that's going to stop it from sliding. So we got that. And now see, this is end grain, right? So this is on the angled part, but you're going to take some of the end grain, you're going to rub the glue into the end grain. And it's going to disappear into the wood. Now what's that going to do is that's going to give you a good connection, because end grain does not always glue well. So now we're going to put our glue on. We're going to give it a nice contact surface area here. And we're going to slip that on there. Right there, so it comes out even. And like I said, this is the support so that it doesn't tip over on you. You can make that a little fancier, do some carving to it, or make it rounded out if you like. Because then we're going to get that way. And right about here you can see, oh, wait a minute, he messed up. Those clamps are not on high enough. So all I got to do is move that where the clamps are higher up on there so they don't move. And then we're going to put, and I'm just eyeballing the center of this. I'm putting it in the center, but I'm just eyeballing it. It's a pretty easy eyeball. It's not a big space. And we're just going to clamp it up like that and let her go. All right, let's finish this thing up. The glue is set. Now for the glue that I'm using, it's about a 20-minute set time and then 24 hours for a complete set. I let this set for about 20 minutes or so. And now all I'm doing is I'm taking a piece of hand sandpaper and I'm realizing, oh yeah, I never took the tape off. So it's probably a good time to do that. This is why it's called finishing it up. You want to make sure everything's good. And all I'm doing is I'm coming by with that piece of sand sanding and just relieving all of those edges. Because if you remember earlier, I told you that if you relieve all the edges just a little bit, it doesn't splinter as easy. And that's what you don't want, is for a little splinter to come up. Don't want that at all. So, and especially with this maple, it's really nice. The close grain woods are really good for that. They don't splinter very much at all anyway. But this is just, we're just going through and we're hitting all the edges and giving them a small relief. If for some reason your bottom doesn't quite match up, like, it's slid a bit when you glue it or something like that. Now's the time to get it back on the sander, get it back on some paper, on some sandpaper, and sand it nice and straight if you need to. Sandpaper will equalize everything. If you didn't want to cut those angles in, you could literally sand them in. It wouldn't be a big deal. But there it is, guys. All set. Ready for whatever finish you like. For us, I'm just going to do a butcher block conditioner on this, which is basically a mix of beeswax and mineral oil. Have fun.